everyone and welcome yet again to another sculpting video, where today I'll be making the Beldam, otherwise known as the other mother, from the movie Coraline, to celebrate the film's 15th anniversary since release. With that said, I cannot wait to show you, so let's get right into it. Like usual, I start off with a foil base. I kind of fold it into this flat oval sort of shape, which is going to act as the hips later on. I then set that to the side as I cut 4 pieces of identically lengthed metal wire and I bend them as the knees. They're all bent very slightly differently, and I also have to shave off sort of the tips of them as they get a bit spiky, and I don't really want that to hurt me. And then attach them to the hips just by pressing them gently into the foil and then wrapping some extra foil around the legs, as well as some more masking tape too. They are a bit flimsy and they don't really seem to like to sit in place, so I have a lot of problems with them throughout this whole sculpture, but don't worry, that's for later on. Also, that little slit at the end of the hips kind of area doesn't matter, I will be removing that later. And then I start to work on the chest. The torso of the other mother is very thin. It is pretty much the thickness of the metal wire, so I don't really have to change that all too much. Now, I do sincerely apologise, I completely forgot to show you me whacking the clay and rolling it out. Don't worry, I will show you later though. So I start to wrap the hip area. I don't really know what to call that area, sort of the bottom end, with clay. And you see those little spikes kind of that were at the end of it? Those are irrelevant, do not worry about them. I will be getting rid of those later and replacing them with something way better. Anyways, I roll out some clay quite thin and layer it over the legs. Usually when I do this sort of technique, I do make the clay a bit thicker, but as the legs are very thin and spindly, I try and make it as thin as I can without it splitting while applying it. And of course, I redo that exact same process for the other 4 legs. Just rolling the clay out thin, cutting it down with the knife, and then attaching it, kind of folding over the top so that I can blend out the seams. Now you may have noticed by now that it doesn't really seem to stand on its own. Now that's because one of the legs is raised up and also they seem to be just a little bit flimsy, so I decide to make another base. I've done this so many times and it gets boring, but you know, just folding foil. I also this time do it a little bit differently by adding some metal wire into it, just so that it holds its shape a bit better. And then I whack the clay, roll it out, apply it with some of the clay glue, and I cut around the edges. You don't see it now, but I do add clay on the bottom as well. I kind of ran out of clay midway through this one, so didn't get to do that just yet, but I did do it later. Then I go in and start working on the chest area. I wrap some clay around that sort of ball that I made, and then I add some more clay, kind of, you know, for that area, and I pinch them because, you know, they're very sharp. I don't know why they're very sharp on her. I mean, I guess she is supposed to be kind of jagged all over, which is kind of cool. I like that. And then, well, after I've done that and applied a lot more clay and made sure to bulk it up, I do add the arms pretty much the exact same way as I did the legs. I poke the hole, put the metal wire into the hole, and then make those little clay lines and add them on top like I said I would do. The arms are in 2 different positions. That's kind of obvious, I don't know why I said that. Anyways, like I said earlier, I cut that little end bit off on the bottom area and then decided to switch it out for these little pieces of metal wire, again wrapping it like I did with the legs, but even thinner this time. And I had to do quite a lot of them. I don't know what they are at the kind of back of her. I've seen lots of references, despite there not being very many online, which is kind of annoying. And they're kind of just like little spikes coming out the back, which is nice, so I added those, and then I also added this sort of shoulder area. I did it a little bit too big, so I had to cut it down with my knife, and I did it on the other shoulder, and then I added the little bit of clay there, which is for the like forearm, squishy bit forearm, and then the equivalent of that on the leg is the calf. I don't know what it's called. And then after I've added those bits, I start to work on the chest rib sort of area. I add these little kind of spiky cones of clay down, blending them out just a little bit so that they're still raised enough, and then I indent on them, and then so just pretty much they are like bone. Honestly, I don't think the Beldam has any skin by the end of it, because she's completely white and you can see her bones very visibly, so I assume it's bone. So I make it bone. The ribs, you know. And then of course I need to actually add the piece of cloth around that. Not the piece of cloth, you know, the dress. So I cut a piece of clay and then blend it out so that it looks as if there's just a whole top on top of the chest. Wow, I cannot speak today, I am so sorry. And then there's also another kind of layered bit on top of the back side area. The back, I don't know. Cosclay is what I use there because Cosclay is a bit bendy after it's baked. I didn't really need to use it in that area, but I thought it was a little bit flimsy, so better not risk it. Might as well use some Cosclay. And then you see how thin I'm rolling it out? It's because I need to start working on the bottom of the dress. Now, I've seen lots of different techniques on how to make fabric. Now, because there isn't any foil kind of underneath the fabric or any metal wire going through it, I decided just to fold it kind of just how like fabric falls. To kind of understand how fabric moves, you simply can just use a piece of fabric and test out the different ways that it bends. Lie it over a chair or something and you'll see that it well, okay, I take it back. It does also, you know, the material does matter as well, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Fabric bends in different ways depending on what the fabric is and also kind of how big it is and stuff. I did use a piece of fabric just to test out how it would look. And then I tried to recreate that using folds that I make. Now, the legs are similar to that of a spider in some sort of weird way. I added kind of little bits and then these kind of barbed kind of areas on the bottom legs. I have always wanted to do kind of some sort of spider-human hybrid, but I haven't been able to. And honestly, this kind of scratches that itch for me. I don't know why. Because, you know, it's 6 legs. Well, actually, no, I take it back. It's 4 legs. It's 4 legs and 2 arms. But either way, kind of gives off, you know, spider vibes. And then I start to work on the head. I do it separately to the main body, just so that I have a bit more room to move it around and feel it, you know. I do use a wooden skewer just to be able to hold it as well at times where I've added so much detail that holding it would be a bit risky. When it comes to faces, I have learnt that it's best to take away clay, not to add it. Add a bit of clay at the start to kind of build out the main shape and then start just to take away the clay, because the more that you add the clay, the more likely there are to be unnecessary seams, and then that ruins the overall look of kind of, you know, the face, and you want it to be kind of as smooth as possible. But of course, I say that, and then on the Beldam of all things, she has cracks all over her face, so I can't, you know, I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, to make the mouth, it kind of looked like she was smiling at first, but then she is smiling, but, you know, without her teeth showing. So I carved inside the mouth. And then doing the lips, like I said, I kind of just take away clay from around the mouth instead of layering up the lips. And then I make the teeth just by scratching in simple, you know, lines, both horizontally and vertically. She wasn't looking smiley enough, so I kind of put the corners of her mouth up a little bit. And then these aren't the eyebrows, this is the brow bone. You can't really tell at the end, but it just kind of adds some sort of raised area so that when I add the eyebrows, it's not like I just stuck them to her forehead. She has very thin eyebrows. That's all I'm going to say about them. And then I start to make the cracks. I add the eyes after I do the cracks, as I might accidentally, you know, squish the eye. So I get this sharp tool and scratch it pretty much all over the face. I say scratch, it's like a gentle glide pretty much. And I did use the reference of her face, but I didn't follow it exactly, as this isn't an exact model of the Beldam. It's sort of my interpretation, but kind of not. I just, you know, it looks like the Beldam. You could tell if you look at it, it looks like the Beldam. That's what I'm trying to say. But I add in my own twists here and there. And then I add the eyes. I kind of push them in using this ball tool to give them that sort of, what's the name for that shape? I don't know. It's like a red blood cell sort of shape where it kind of goes inwards. I don't know how to explain it. They're buttons, you know that by now. And then to make the hair, I do use Cosclay. I didn't need to use Cosclay, but as the hair does kind of drip down a little bit, I didn't want to risk it being snapped. So I used Cosclay. I had it all on. Stupidly not using foil underneath it, so I did use quite a lot of Cosclay, which wasn't the smartest thing to do. Her hair is a very weird shape, so again, I just kind of followed a reference that I could find. I have seen people talk a lot online about how it is quite difficult to find references of the Beldam, as in the movie there's only really 1 or 2 scenes where her full body in this form is shown, so over time I kind of just went with what I thought would look best. Her proportions are very slightly off, her legs especially, but I don't mind. Anyways, that's relevant. I'm doing the hair. Kind of similar to how I did the fabric, where I just roll out a thin piece and then I cut in little slits to make it look like the different sections of hair. And then with this silicone tool, I haven't said that in a while. I can't remember the last time. I used to go crazy about that in my old videos anyways. Silicone tool, thin one, you know, kind of spiky at the end, and I kind of just glide it down the Cosclay. The thing about Cosclay is it gets into your pores. It's very, very sticky and annoying, and but that also means that, you know, when I'm using this silicone tool, when I'm trying to glide these sort of lines in, it can be quite difficult, as it sort of drags the clay instead of just indenting it. So, you know, it's annoying, but you'll find a way. I don't know what I'm saying. And then I start to work on the neck. It's kind of like a vertebrae sort of neck. It's like her spine. Again, it's just bones at this point. She doesn't really have skin. She doesn't have skin in this form, but tried to make it kind of look like the spine area, vertebrae thingy. Do a little bit of crack in it, and then no, that sounded weird. You know what I mean. Anyways, I start to work on the hands. Now, the Beldam has hands made out of metal wire, pretty much, but I didn't exactly know how to recreate that, so I just kind of did normal hands that I usually do, but it came out alright. It looks like they should. So I add all 5 fingers, you know, make sure that they look as spindly as possible, kind of like metal wire, like I was saying, and then I cut them off. I have to be very delicate at this stage because, you know, they can break, but I cut them off so that I can bake them, so that I won't accidentally smush them later on when I'm trying to do other details. Also, on the back of the Beldam's kind of head, not really on the back of her head, but she has this sort of collar area on her dress, so I put that in. It's quite big, and I like that. It kind of adds a bit more area behind the head, kind of brings it all together a little bit more. So, of course, and then attach the head. I do use clay glue, but I didn't show that because I did it off camera because I forgot to record it. Anyways, I work a tiny bit more on the dress, and then I start to work on the arms. Similar to how I do that on the legs, I add sort of spidery sort of indents, you know, bumps and lumps and stuff, that kind of thing, and spikes every once in a while. And then, you know, using that sharp metal tool that I have been using pretty much this entire time, I add the cracks as well. Then I have to work on the base. Now, before it's baked, I can simply just lift up the fabric, or the Cosclay, like that, to get underneath it. After it's baked, it's not so simple, but I will explain that later anyways. As I'm making the floorboards, I add them all in. Now, with wood, as this is, you know, it's from Coraline, right? It's kind of a spooky sculpture, I'll give it that. When it comes to wood, the wobblier and deeper the lines are, the more spooky the wood looks. I don't really know how to justify that, but it is true, in my opinion. But also, the wood is a little bit warped and old, which is what I'm trying to get at with that, you know, wiggly lines. So I'm also making sure that a few of the floorboards are also lifted up. That one might look a little bit unstable, that kind of big one there. Don't worry, there will be something placed under it later. Never make that noise again. I do add a few little, you know, bits that you can't really tell afterwards, but you know, like the eyes and that sort of face I made. I then go in and add the cracks along the legs as well, and then the Beldam herself is pretty much done. So I go in and do the two final pieces. You could probably tell one of them from the thumbnail. Wait, actually no, never mind. I take it back. I don't know what thumbnail I'm doing yet. I start to make the little Coraline doll. So it's quite small. I can't say I really specialise in doing tiny things. I mean, I can do tiny things, but it takes a while. So I make the little doll. This is attempt, I think, 2 of me doing it. I tried one time and it completely failed. So I'm now trying again, you know, just adding the arms, the legs, the little, I can't really say legs, it's more just feet at the bottom. To do the raincoat, I do that kind of flipping thing where I have the piece of clay running up the side and then I flip it around the back and it looks like a hood for the, not the umbrella, the coat, her signature yellow coat. And then, of course, doing the face as well. I can't say it's perfect, you know, it's tiny. The head is about the size of my fingernail, so, and I'm no nail artist. Sorry. The doll is done after this point, you know. And then there's one more little detail that I did. That's probably not in the thumbnail. I don't know yet, like I said. It's one of the little jumping mice. Oh, you know, I said there was going to be something under that floorboard earlier. Yeah, it's the mice. It's the little mousy mouse. Love the jumping mice. They are adorable. Not when they, you know, show their true form, but... And then once they're done, I decide to bake everything. Now, because I was a little bit scared that the legs were going to fall over and the whole thing would just kind of fall, I added those 3 pieces of metal wire, kind of holding them up, and also I needed to decide whether I wanted the Coraline on the top hand or bottom hand. I did an Instagram poll and the top hand won, so I decided to put the Coraline doll onto the top hand after I've painted it, of course, so I start to paint it. Of course, I try and do it as close as I can to the actual Coraline doll. Again, on this scale, it's a little bit difficult, but I think I get quite close in the end. I give her, you know, just the clothes that she has on the doll. I don't try and make it any different. It's just the little doll. And then, yeah, also the hair is slightly off. On the actual doll, the hair is just a little bit off, but I feel like I went a little bit too far. So later on, you probably won't be able to notice, but I do change the hair colour just very slightly, just so it's a little bit more vibrant like her actual hair colour. I also, of course, paint the mouse just like they look in the film with their little red top hat and the little red suit that they're wearing. How cute! And of course, their little button eyes as well. Everything has their button eyes, do not worry. Then I have to start working on the wood. Now you see, I have to lift up the cloth very slightly. There is nothing underneath that, meaning that I have to get under the entire thing to paint it, including the inside of the fabric as well. So you can imagine how difficult that is, but I'm not going to show it because I can't really, because it won't really show up. Anyways, I try and make the wood look just a little bit dead. I do the dry brushing on top where I get a little bit of paint on my brush and then just gently gliding over the top so that it, you know, accents it so the details I made stand out. I also use a bit of black in between the floorboards just to split them up a little bit as they were looking a bit too samey and you couldn't really tell their definition. Now I had a big problem. Of course, at the start of the video I said that I ran out of clay halfway through this. Yeah, I also ran out of black paint, meaning every time I needed black paint I had to remix it, which got quite difficult. I had to mix my own black paint. It turned out just very slightly purple tinted, but I think that actually kind of works out a little bit. Of course, I did 2 coats of everything. I did do it on the skin. I am very aware that the bone kind of look to it is white. However, I have my reasoning. I put the black in all of the little cracks everywhere, so that when I add the white one later, that black is in that crack, so I don't have to go in and add the black. So you see, I have to paint the white on top, and because the cracks are indented, I don't need to make any effort to avoid them. I could just paint it and it will naturally avoid the cracks, which is great. Also, I add a bit of grey kind of around the cracks. This is to give it a little bit more definition. The actual model has that, so I do it just to give it so that the face isn't just completely white. Also, it is slightly an off-white colour. It's not perfectly white. I can't tell if my camera shows it very well, but it's not perfectly white. So, of course, I can do it a little bit less delicately on the legs and arms, so I kind of just dry brush over it, as well as dry brushing the hands and these little bits at the end, a silver colour. And then onto the hard part, the polka dot dress. The dress is completely covered in dots like this, so I spent an entire day dotting this dress. Okay, I say it's the entire day, about 8 hours-ish, just putting dots all over the dress. Now, I did screw up a few times. It's inevitable, you know. I wasn't using any sort of circular tool. I was just using my paintbrush. See there, I messed it up. To fix any mess ups like that, I just use a different paintbrush, get some water on it, kind of smush it around a little bit, and then I can pick it up with a dry brush and it will just scoop right off. It's quite easy, but you have to catch it as soon as you screw up. Of course, after I've done all the dots, I realise that they look very vibrant. On the model, it's not that visible. So I go in with slightly brown colour and just dry brush all over, just so that it makes it look a bit more dirty. And then the final touch, I attach the jumping mice into the hole, or the floorboard, like it's a little sneaky guy, and then the Coraline doll in the top hand. And then it's completely finished. I really hope you enjoy this one. Honestly, I'm a giant fan of how this came out, and I think doing something on, you know, in time of the 15th anniversary of Coraline was a good idea, because I was always planning on doing something to do with Coraline because it's a great film and I love it. I am just happy but that this is done, honestly. It was difficult. Yeah, it was not an easy one because it just kept falling over and it wouldn't stand up. It's very annoying. But, you know, I do appreciate you being here and sticking around, and I know I'm annoying and I talk really fast, but thank you for staying here. I really do appreciate it. And of course, here comes the awkward part. If you enjoyed the video, then maybe consider leaving a like. It would really help me out. Of course, do it on your own accord. Don't do it because I asked. And of course, if you want to see more like this in the future, then you could also subscribe. And I would also, again, also very much really appreciate it. You are awesome. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye. Bye.